Hello, everybody. We're live here, and we're going to get right into it about this director of the Secret Service, Cheadle, and we're going to go right to a video of the House Committee's service hearing, and let's get right into it. Okay, let me back this up a little bit. I'm going to get right into it right now. Put this down so you can see it.
Would you say the fact that we had to issue a subpoena to get you to show up today as being transparent? Yes or no?
I have always been.
Yes or no? You didn't want to answer the question. We had to issue a subpoena to get you to show up today. That is not transparent, by the way. You stated earlier, Secret Service is not political. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Would you say leaking your opening statement to Punchbowl News, Politico's Playbook, and Washington Post several hours before you sent it to this committee as being political? Yes or no?
I have no idea how my statement got out.
Well, that's bull. Have you provided all audio and video recordings in your possession to this committee, as we asked on July 15th? Yes or no?
I would have to get back to you.
That is a no. You're full of today. You're just being completely dishonest. Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Chairman,
I want to.
Mr.
Come on.
We have to maintain decorum in this committee, no matter how
have you provided
upset we
any
get.
and all?
I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today. The assassination attempt of former President Donald Trump on July 3rd is the most significant operational failure of the Secret Service in decades, and I am keeping him and his family in my thoughts. I would like to offer my sincerest condolences to the family of Corey Comparator, a former fire chief and a hero who was killed in this senseless shooting. I would also like to acknowledge those who were injured in Butler, David Dutch, and James Copenhagen, and I wish them a speedy recovery. I would be remiss if I did not also extend my condolences on the passing of your colleague, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. Ms. Jackson Lee was always engaged in the oversight of the Secret Service, and her passing is a great loss to this body. The Secret Service's solemn mission is to protect our nation's leaders. On July 13th, we failed. As a director of the United States Secret Service, I take full responsibility for any security lapse of our agency. We are fully cooperating with ongoing investigations. We must learn what happened, and I will move heaven and earth to ensure that an incident like July 13th does not happen again.
Some are calling it a miracle that former President Trump escaped this AR-15 attack, unlike so many thousands of our fellow citizens who have been killed or seriously wounded in other AR-15 shootings. Whether this miracle is of divine providence or of an adventitious nature will be up to each of us to ponder, but our job in Congress is not simply to marvel at miracles or count on good luck, but to act as public policy legislators to do whatever we can to prevent future political violence, attempted assassinations, and mass shootings. The chairman and I are thus determined to get to the bottom of the stunning security failures that enabled this 20-year-old lone gunman who borrowed his father's AR-15 to perpetrate a mass shooting and assassination attempt at an event protected by the Secret Service, as well as state and local police. We'll ask hard questions of Director Cheadle today in order to identify and understand the shocking security failures that occurred and to help transform the operations of the Secret Service to prevent anything like this from happening again. But we can't let ourselves off the hook either, dear colleagues. What happened in Butler, Pennsylvania was a double failure. The failure by the Secret Service to properly protect former President Trump and the failure of Congress to properly protect our people from criminal gun violence. We must therefore also ask hard questions about whether our laws are making it too easy for potential assassins to obtain firearms generally and the AR-15 specifically. Mr. Comparatore, former President Trump, and the other rally attendees wounded in Butler are now members of a club no one wants to belong to, the thousands of people who have fallen victim to mass shootings.
Are ISIS terrorists and Al-Qaeda terrorists and international groups and terrorists more capable than a 20-year-old in pulling off their mass shooting or an assassination of Donald Trump?
Sir, again, there was clearly a breakdown and a failure that day.
Have you read the intelligence of the terrorists that are currently in the United States that Director Wray speaks? And those individuals that are here that are affiliated with terrorist groups and organizations that are in the process, as Director Wray said, of representing a significant threat of a terrorist attack occurring in the United States?
I have read reports that apply specifically to the Secret Service's mission.
Director Cheadle, because Donald Trump is alive, and thank God he is, you look incompetent. If Donald Trump had been killed, you would have looked culpable. There is no aspect of this that indicates that there has been any protection to Donald Trump. The threat was identified before he took the stage, and the shooter was only killed after Donald Trump himself was killed. Not only should you resign, if you refuse to do so, President Biden needs to fire you, because his life, Donald Trump's life, and all the other people which you protect are at risk because you have no concept of the aspect that the security footprint needs to be correlated to the threat.
You knew that everyone knew. The people there knew that there was a danger. They knew there was a threat to President Trump, and it was allowed to happen. Was there a stand-down order, Ms. Cheadle? Was there a conspiracy to kill President Trump?
Absolutely not.
Then how did this happen? Still sitting here, not turning in your letter of resignation. People under your command did not consider him to be a threat, yet people in the crowd knew he had a gun and considered him to be a threat. That means that you are a complete failure as the director of the Secret Service, that people under your command don't perceive a man laying on a roof with direct line to the president with a gun. They don't perceive that to be a threat, yet the people in the crowd do. How is that possible?
I'm not certain at this time how the information from the people in the crowd was relayed to any law enforcement personnel.
Also reaffirmed his endorsement of Vice President Kamala Harris, who now has the support of
Okay, that was the first video. Let's get to another one real quick.
Would you say the fact that we had to issue a
Of a terrorist attack occurring in the United States.
Democracy.
Whether we keep our republic is now in your hands.
Now, the president has a big day tomorrow with a meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at the White House, trying to make progress in getting hostages home. I'm in Washington. I'm out here from home.
That includes our question segment. I want to thank the director for your testimony today. I now yield to the ranking member for closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And Director Cheadle, I also want to thank you for your patience over the course of what must have been a very long and trying hearing for you. It has been an unusually encouraging hearing and an unusually depressing hearing. And what's encouraging, Mr. Chairman, is that we came together to issue a strong statement deploring and categorically denouncing political violence in America. And I also didn't see any daylight between the members of the two parties today at the hearing in terms of our bafflement and outrage about the shocking operational failures that led to disaster and near catastrophe on July 13th, 2024. What is depressing is the extraordinary communications gap between the director of the Secret Service and Congress. And I don't want to add to the director's terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day. But I will be joining the chairman in calling for the resignation of the director, just because I think that this relationship is irretrievable at this point. And I think that the director has lost the confidence of Congress at a very urgent and tender moment in the history of the country. And we need to very quickly move beyond this. But what I will say, Mr. Chairman, is that I took this hearing to be about two major policy failures. And one policy failure is the one that got the vast majority of the attention, which was the failure of the Secret Service to effectively respond to a gunman on a roof within 150 yards of a presidential visit and speech. But the other failure is on the part of Congress, because the mass shooting that took place in Butler, Pennsylvania, is replicated all over the country every day. And in fact, as I said, Mr. Chairman, it happened that evening in Alabama, in Birmingham, Alabama, where there was a mass shooting where more people even were killed and wounded than were killed and wounded in Butler, Pennsylvania. So it's true, the president, the former president, the handful of people
He's
who
making
kept the Secret
this is
Service protection
he's
are
making
the
political
only
bullshit
people in America
talk.
we
It's
thought
not
were safe
has nothing to
from
do
an
with
AR-15
what's going on there.
attack. It's clear that they're not.
Not a thing. Not a fucking thing.
University of Maryland Global Campus is a school for real life, one that values the successes you've already achieved. Earn up to 90 undergraduate credits for relevant experience, and get the support you need from your first day
Here's
to
the lady
graduation day and beyond.
we want to see. All right.
On July 15th,
Come on.
No application fee if you apply by August 29th at University of Maryland Global Campus, an accredited university that's transformed
I'm sorry.
adult
Excuse me 1 second.
See, so help you God. Let the record show that the witness answered in the affirmative. Thank you. We certainly appreciate you being here today and look forward to your testimony. We normally limit testimony to opening statement to 5 minutes, but take all the time that you need. Obviously, the rules that we will abide by. When you're finished with your statement, we will then turn to questions. Each member will have 5 minutes. And just a note to the members, I'm going to strictly adhere to the 5 minutes. Once 5 minutes is up, I will hit the gavel. If the director is in the process of answering a question, we'll certainly let her finish her answers, and then we will move on. We're going to have about 100% attendance here today, plus a few additional add-ons. So this will be a very lengthy hearing, and we want to make sure every member gets their 5 minutes uninterrupted to be able to ask these important questions in this very bipartisan hearing today. I now recognize Director Cheadle for your opening statement.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Comer, Ranking Member Raskin, and distinguished members of the committee. My name is Kimberly Cheadle, and I am the Director of the United States Secret Service. I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today. The assassination attempt of former President Donald Trump on July 13th is the most significant operational failure of the Secret Service in decades, and I am keeping him and his family in my thoughts. I would like to offer my sincerest condolences to the family of Corey Comparator, a former fire chief and a hero who was killed in this senseless shooting. I would also like to acknowledge those who were injured in Butler, David Dutch and James Copenhagen, and I wish them a speedy recovery. I would be remiss if I did not also extend my condolences on the passing of your colleague, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. Ms. Jackson Lee was always engaged in the oversight of the Secret Service, and her passing is a great loss to this body. The Secret Service's solemn mission is to protect our nation's leaders. On July 13th, selflessly willing to make the ultimate sacrifice without hesitation. I am proud beyond words of the actions taken by the former president's detail, the counter sniper team who neutralized the gunman, and the tactical team who was prepared to act. I will be transparent as possible when I speak with you, understanding, though, at times that I may be limited in providing a thorough response in this open setting due to associated risks with sharing highly sensitive protective methodologies. I do not want to inadvertently provide you today with inaccurate information. Since January 1st, 2024, the Secret Service has successfully secured over 7,500 sites. Every protective advance comes with its own set of challenges and requires a customized mitigation strategy, including specific assets. Security plans are multi-layered, providing 360 degrees of protection. These layers include personnel, technical, and tactical assets, which are a force multiplier for our protective posture. During every advance, we attempt to strike a balance between enabling the protectee to be visible and our protective requirements to be secure. I know this because I have spent 29 years in this agency. I came up through the ranks. I've secured events for every president since President Clinton, supervised on Vice President Cheney's detail, led our training center, oversaw all of the investigations and protective visits in the state of Georgia, supervised on Vice President Biden's detail, and the agency's entire protective mission during the Trump administration. The comprehensive advance process involves collaborative planning between our Secret Service, the protectee's staff, local law enforcement partners, and the level of security provided for the former president increased well before the campaign and has been steadily increasing as threats evolve. The security plan included a full assessment of the Butler Farm showgrounds to identify security vulnerabilities and craft a security plan for the protectee, attendees, and the public. Immediately following the assassination attempt, I directed the activation of my crisis center. I assembled my executive team to begin surging more protective resources to the former president and to ensure the wellness of our people post-incident, all while securing an active crime scene. I immediately ordered a reevaluation of the Republican National Convention security plan, and I increased the security posture in the National Capital Region for all permanent protectees and sites. At the same time, I initiated a mission assurance investigation within our agency. I have instructed my team that all necessary resources will be dedicated to investigating these matters. We will not rest until we have explored every option, and we will leave no stone unturned. But I want to be clear, I am not waiting for these investigations to be completed prior to making changes. Over the past 2 weeks, we successfully led the planning and execution of the 75th NATO Summit and the Republican National Convention. Over the next few months, we will implement security plans for the Democratic National Convention, the United Nations General Assembly, and have already begun planning and coordinating the 2025 inauguration. It is now more important than ever for the men and women of the Secret Service to remain resilient, and to focus on what is necessary to carry out our critical mission. Our agency needs to be adequately resourced in order to serve our current mission requirements and anticipate future requirements. The Secret Service currently protects 36 individuals on a daily basis, as well as world leaders who visit the United States, like Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who arrived in Washington, D.C. today. The coming years will bring an unprecedented heavy protection tempo. I have no doubt that the processes that I have implemented during my tenure as director, in addition to my nearly 30 years of experience in this agency, have positioned the Secret Service to be stronger. Our mission is not political. It is literally a matter of life and death, and the tragic events on July 13th remind us of that. I have full confidence in the men and women of the Secret Service. They are worthy of our support in executing our protective mission. I will now answer any questions that the committee may have.
Thank you very much, Director Cheadle. We'll now begin our 5 minutes questions, and I will begin. Just for the record, the Secret Service has an annual budget of around $3.1 billion, and I believe around 8,000 employees. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Obviously, there were many security failures on the day of the attempted assassination and leading up to that day. Let's start with the building that the shooter used to shoot President Trump from. At any point Saturday, did the Secret Service have an agent on top of that roof?
Sir, I'm sure, as you can imagine, that we are just 9 days out from this incident, and there's still an ongoing investigation. And so I want to make sure that any information that we are providing to you is factual.
You can't, okay. Why did the Secret Service not, can you answer why the Secret Service didn't place a single agent on the roof?
We are still looking into the advanced process and the decisions that were made.
Well, okay. Wasn't that building within the perimeter that should be secured? Do we agree with that?
The building was outside of the perimeter on the day of the visit. But again, that is one of the things that during the investigation, we want to take a look at and determine whether or not other decisions should have been made.
One of the things that you said, I believe in an interview, that there wasn't an agent on the roof because it was a sloped roof. Is that normal? And do you fear that immediately creates an opportunity for future would-be assassins to look for a slanted roof? I mean, this is a huge question that every American has. Why wasn't a Secret Service agent on the roof? And there have been reports that agents were supposed to be on the roof, but it was hot that day and they didn't want to be on the roof. Can you answer any of those questions, Greg?
So I appreciate you asking me that question, Chairman. I should have been more clear in my answer when I spoke about where we place personnel in that interview. What I can tell you is that there was a plan in place to provide overwatch, and we are still looking into responsibilities and who was going to provide overwatch. But the Secret Service in general, not speaking specifically to this incident, when we are providing overwatch, whether that be through counter snipers or other technology, prefer to have sterile rooftops.
Did the Secret Service use any drones for surveillance that day?
So again, I'm not going to get into specifics of that day in itself, but there are times during a security plan that the Secret Service does deploy an asset like a drone.
There were reports that the shooter used a drone just a few hours before the rally start time. Is that accurate?
I have heard those same reports, and again, am waiting for the final report.
Do you know, if you can't answer the question, that's your answer. But can you answer this? Do you know? I'm not asking yes or no, but do you know if the shooter used a drone before the shooting?
That information has been passed to us from the FBI.
How many Secret Service agents were assigned to President Trump on the day of the rally?
Again, I'm not going to get into the specifics of the numbers of personnel that we had there, but we feel that there was a sufficient number of agents assigned.
There are reports that several agents assigned to the rally on July 13th were temporary agents not normally assigned to President Trump. Is that accurate?
What I can tell you is that the agents that were assigned to former President Trump are Secret Service agents that provide close protection to him, and that was what was actual on that day.
How many temporary agents were there that day?
Quite frequently, sir, during campaign events, the Secret Service utilizes agents from HSI or the Department of Homeland Security.
You don't know how many?
Supplement our plan.
Had the investigators reconstructed the shooter's precise movements over the past days, weeks, and months?
So
But
again,
we need to have confidence that if the FBI is leading this investigation, that they're leading a credible investigation, because there's some of us sitting up here today that don't have a lot of confidence in them. So I will repeat the question. Have the investigators reconstructed the shooter's precise moments over the past days, weeks, and months?
I understand your question, Chairman, and I share your concerns about wanting to make sure that we have factual information. The FBI is conducting a criminal investigation. The Secret Service is conducting an internal investigation. There are a number of OIG investigations, and there is the external investigation. The president.
Last question for me. Before July 13th, had the Trump detail requested additional resources?
What I can tell you is that for the event on July 13th, the details that were the assets that were requested for that day were given.
My time has expired. Chair now recognizes this ranking member asking for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's been reported that before former President Trump got up on the stage at around 6 p.m. on Saturday, July 13th, that the local police had identified and even photographed a man who was acting suspiciously. And this man, who turned out to be the gunman, had been flagged as a potential threat. Is that accurate?
What I can say is that the individual was identified as suspicious.
So he was known to be suspicious before former President Trump took the stage.
That is the information I have received.
Why was he allowed to take the stage with a suspicious person having been identified in the crowd?
So I appreciate the question, and I'd like to make 2 points. If the detail had been passed information that there was a threat, the detail would never have brought the former president out onto stage. That is what we do, and that is who we are. We are charged with protecting all of our protectees.
So you distinguish between someone who is suspicious and someone who's threatening, is that right?
We do. There are a number of times at protective events where suspicious people are identified, and those individuals have to be investigated and determine what is it that identifies that person as suspicious.
Did you deny a request for additional resources that had been made by the Trump campaign?
There were no assets denied for that event in Butler on the 13th.
I see. So you're saying there were requests made for additional assistance for other specific events rather than for the campaign as a whole. Is that right?
I'm sorry, I'm not understanding.
Well, you seem to say that there were not additional resources requested for that event. And forgive me for being unfamiliar with this. Is it requested event by event, or is it requested just in general for the campaign?
So if I can explain the advance process, when an event or a venue is identified by, in this case, campaign staff works together with Secret Service agents who go out and conduct an advance. Generally, that is a 5-day time period where those discussions are had about what the perimeter is going to look like, what the size of the event is, what the venue is, and then from there, there is a request made to mitigate potential risk and threat. And I'm saying that on that day, the requests that were pushed forward were granted.
So the Secret Service did not know that the gunman actually had a weapon before President Trump was allowed to get up on the stage?
To the best of our knowledge and the facts that we have at this point, that is correct.
So can you answer this question, which I think is on the mind of most Americans thinking about this? How can a 20-year-old with his father's AR-15 assault weapon climb onto a roof with a direct 150-yard line of sight to the speaker's podium without the Secret Service or local police stopping him?
So again, sir, I will say we are 9 days out from this event, and I would like to know those answers as well, which is why we are going through these investigations to be able to determine that fully.
Okay. It's been reported that the shooter was not carrying a driver's license or any form of identification. They had no idea who he was, but then he was quickly identified, I think within 30 minutes, by using the serial number on the AR-15 under a tracing system that is now controversial. Some people say we should get rid of it. Some people want to keep it. But is that right that the serial number was the key information which led to the identification of the shooter?
That is my understanding, sir, yes.
Okay. If an American citizen were just to stop you and say, Director Cheadle, we support your work to the tune of billions of dollars and thousands of employees, what went wrong? What would you say?
Again, knowing that we're 9 days out, I would say, as I have said from the very outset, I accept responsibility for this tragedy. We are going to look into how this happened, and we are going to take corrective action to ensure that it never happens again.
Well, I appreciate that, and I hope you will act with vigor and focus and intensity, and it seems you understand the gravity and solemnity of this to the American people. Millions and millions of Americans don't feel safe with all the AR-15s out there. We thought at least the President of the United States or a former President of the United States would be safe, but now that's not even clear. Mr. Chairman, I yield back to you.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes the Chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, Mr. Jordan from Ohio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director, were you guessing or lying? Day after President Trump is shot, Secret Service spokesman Anthony Guglielmi said, quote, the assertion that a member of the former president's security team requested additional security resources that the U.S. Secret Service or the Department of Homeland Security rebuffed is absolutely false. The next day, Secretary Mayorkas said that is an unequivocally false assertion. We had not received any requests for additional security measures that were rebuffed. But 5 days later, the Washington Post said this. Top officials repeatedly rejected requests from Donald Trump's security detail for more personnel. The next day, the New York Times said this. Mr. Guglielmi acknowledged that the Secret Service had turned down some requests for additional federal security assets for Mr. Trump's detail. So which is it? Because both statements can't be true. Were you guessing or lying when you said you didn't turn down requests from President Trump's detail?
Neither, sir, and I appreciate the question.
What were you doing? Because those statements don't jive.
So what I can tell you is that for the event in Butler, there were no requests that were denied. As far as requests...
Well, maybe they got tired of asking. Maybe you turned them down so darn much, they said, not worth asking. How many times did you turn them down ahead of that?
I think that it is important to distinguish between what some people may view as a denial of an asset or a request.
Well, is Mr. Guglielmi your spokesperson? He said he acknowledged the Secret Service had turned down some requests. I'm asking how many?
A denial of a request does not equal a vulnerability.
Well, tell me what it is.
There are a number of ways that threats and risks can be mitigated with a number of different assets, whether that be through personnel, whether that be through technology or other resources.
Well, tell the committee which it was. They asked for additional help in some form or another. You told them no. How many times did you tell them no, and what did you tell them no to?
Again, I cannot speak to specific incidents, but I can tell you in general terms, the Secret Service is judicious with their resources based on...
What does some request mean? How many times? Some indicate request is plural. So more than once they asked for additional help and you turned them down. What did they ask for and how many times did you turn them down? Pretty basic questions.
So again, without having all of the details in front of me, sir, what I can tell you is that there are times...
You didn't get briefed on how many times you turned down the Trump detail when they asked for additional help?
I'm sorry.
You didn't get briefed on that before you came to this hearing, knowing you were going to get asked that question?
What I can tell you is that in generic terms, when details make a request, there are times that there are alternate ways to cover off on that threat or that risk.
But that's not what he said. He said they were denied certain requests, some requests. This is your spokesperson, not me talking. This is the Secret Service talking. And what a change from absolutely false, unequivocally false to, oh, by the way, there were some times where we didn't give them what they wanted. That's a huge change in 5 days. And the fact that you can't answer how many times you did that, that's pretty darn frustrating, not just for me, but for the country.
I hear your frustration.
Let me ask you this. Were any of those requests denied to President Trump's detail after you knew about the Iranian threat?
What I can tell you, again, I don't know the specifics, is that there are times when we can fill a request. It doesn't necessarily have to be with a service asset or resource. We can fill that request with locally available assets.
Have you spoke to anyone at the White House since July 13th?
Yes, I have.
Who'd you talk to?
I have briefed the president and the vice president.
Talk to the First Lady?
No, I have not.
Talk to the White House staff? Anyone in White House communications?
No, I have not.
Have you talked to the counter sniper who took the shot that took out the bad guy?
Yes, I have.
And can you tell us about that conversation?
I would not want to reveal conversations that I've had with my employees.
But that's exactly the kind of information the American people want to know. American people who pay your salary.
I understand this is an ongoing investigation, and
Who's all doing the investigating at Secret Service? I know the Inspector General, but is there also an internal investigation in addition to the Inspector General?
We are conducting a mission assurance investigation internally, yes.
You know what it looks like, Director? It looks like you won't answer some pretty basic questions. It looks like you got a 9% raise and you cut corners when it came to protecting one of the most important individuals, most well-known individuals on the planet. A former president, likely the guy's going to be the next president. Looks like you guys were cutting corners. That's what it looks like to me. Is that true?
I am here today because I want to answer questions, but I also want to be
You
cautious.
might want to, but you haven't answered. I don't think you've answered one question from the chairman, the ranking member, or me. We got a lot of other people asking. We'll see if your record improves, but right now you haven't answered, I don't think, any questions. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes Mr. Norton from Washington, D.C.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the summer of 1963, as a law student, I traveled to the South to work in the civil rights movement. When I arrived in Jackson, Mississippi, I was met by a civil rights activist who showed me around town and tried to convince me to work in Jackson that summer. I recall talking with him and his wife about the raw atmosphere in Jackson. Later that day, he took me to the bus station for my trip to my assignment. That night, he was assassinated outside his home. His name was Medgar Evers. I condemn the political violence. It is a threat to democracy. I want to discuss one of the roots of political violence, guns. For years, Republicans, including a member of this committee, have introduced legislation and amendments to repeal or block the District of Columbia gun violence protection laws, including its bans on assault weapons and large capacity magazines. The shooter at the Trump rally used the mass shooter's gun of choice, an assault weapon, specifically an AR-15 style rifle, and presumably a large capacity magazine, which is defined in DC as a magazine that can hold more than 10 bullets. Under current DC law, DC does not recognize concealed carry permits issued by other jurisdictions, but it does issue concealed carry permits to both residents and non-residents. However, DC imposes a number of requirements on concealed carry applicants, including suitability, such as not having exhibited a propensity for violence or instability. Moreover, DC residents restricts where the guns can be carried, such as a political demonstration near the White House and Naval Observatory, or near people under Secret Service protection, provided the permit holder has been given notice. This week, the House is expected to consider the fiscal year 2025 financial services and general government appropriations bill.
That's enough of that.
This Republican drafted bill
Anyway, that's enough of that.
would allow an individual with a permit.
Just to tell you, to recap, the director, you see, she couldn't answer any questions. And it's not because she didn't know the question. She knew everything. But she couldn't answer because, which backs up my article, that 2 parts have been published already in LinkedIn, which you can read if you're on that site. Even in Facebook, I sent them over to there. There's another third article, third part for that article going to be coming out. But she couldn't read it because it's the deep state that pulled this assassination attempt off, not crooks. And you see the question she was asked 9 days out, she can answer. She knows that she just couldn't answer because she knows, she can't say because she knows that it wasn't the kid, it was them. And either she was one of the people that got stabbed in the back and just got rolled over, or she just had to be pulled through the mud for the 2 weeks and go through this hearing. And there was a big chunk of money in a bank account overseas somewhere because right after this hearing, she resigned because notes were being passed to her by some guy in the back ever so often. And the final note might have said, money's in account. The next morning, she put a letter of resignation, and probably got rich. And two other things. We're starting a newsletter article, raw political politics, weekly published into LinkedIn. Read it. Straightforward. No bullshit. Into the story straightforward, no matter what it leads to. And that's it for tonight, everybody. Have a good night. Good morning. Bye-bye.